Hello and welcome to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. I am your host, Aaron Spelker. Mobile Accessible Games is a group that is dedicated to all things about mobile accessible gaming. And through our interview series, we interview game developers, accessibility influencers, as well as accessibility content creators. And this week, we have invited back Adam Gerthel from Act None, who is the creator of Eldrum Red Tide, a great accessible RPG game. And during this part two session and discussion that we have with Adam, we're going to kind of talk about the wish list from the community of things they would love to see added to Red Tide and see, whether Adam considered these things and, maybe turned them down or think they're a great idea, or maybe we'll get some exclusive that these things are coming. So Adam was nice enough to let me pepper him with a bunch of questions about things that we might like to see in Red Tide and hear his thoughts about it. So Adam, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here again.
So, Adam, as I said, we're going to kind of go through. I reached out to the community who have really been excited about this game. Lots of people have been talking about it, and really those particularly those who played Eldrum Untold really were excited about Red Tide coming out, and I think we're impressed by it. Of just how much it added to the mechanics and the gameplay and the content that you had in Untold. Um, Red Tide's probably Untold, three times as much content and strategy and different kinds of loot and things like that and equipment. So a great achievement in Red Tide. But as always, people always want more. So excited by the game, they said it would be even great if we had more. And here's some of the things that we would like to see. So I wanted to pepper you with those and see what your thoughts were about them. And again, kind of see if you considered any of these and decided, not to do them for whatever reason. So we're going to kind of go through that list if that sounds good with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let me get to the list here. All right. So the first thing, we see this a little bit, particularly I think in Act Three, but people were saying it would be great to have a companion that would travel specifically, with the main character and also fight in the fight scenes with the main character, where could control your main character. And maybe just decide to go it alone and fight the battles, but maybe along the way you pick up some characters. In Act Three, you meet a mercenary who helps you out during one particular sequence of the game, which I think people saw and got excited by, but would love to see where they actually controlled that person who, might have their own set of equipment and armor, and you kind of, control their fighting and their attacks against the enemies as well. So, what were your thoughts about, having companions that you acquire along the way and having them actually be, kind of a party system in Red Tide?
Right. So companions is a topic that I think is there's a lot can be said about it. So first of all, I want to make very clear that it's something that we've been wanting to have or wanting to implement from the beginning, really. It's I personally think it can make a game less lonely, especially like a single player game like this. You can feel more connected, kind of, if you have more interactions with someone. So companions are definitely super interesting for us. But the main reason that there are none right now is that it's quite difficult to figure out how to do it and how to handle the consequences of that, because it's a fairly big feature to add, and there's a lot of stuff you need to consider. For instance, what happens if the companion dies in combat?
Mhm.
So if you have a companion that's important for the story, and therefore may be important for your character, if that person dies in combat, how do we deal with that? And of course, it's not an unsolvable problem, but it's something that we need to consider and handle and manage. Uh, and then there's a lot of stuff revolving around you know, if they are too low level, too high level, if they're too, like stronger than you or too weak. And
And
this is this.
definitely some balance,
Mhm.
and do you scale enemy encounters different if you're just going in solo versus you're going in with a two party,
Yeah, yeah. So there's a list, maybe 10 to 20 issues that or conundrums that need to be resolved and decided upon as to like set a framework for how we want companions to work. And then you also have the UI aspects and the voiceover or talkback aspects of it in terms of how do we communicate this how many new UI elements do we need to introduce on the screen, stuff like that. So
is that
all in
something
all,
that again, does it at this stage, you have Red Tide out, it's a game, it's contained, to add a companion type of system specifically to Red Tide, is it kind of like, that ship has sailed because we'd have to so drastically change the game, that it would be a completely different game basically than what we have right now? Is the concept of a companion structure really have to be, from the start of the game and be built up from the beginning, in order to address a lot of these things that you're talking about, as opposed to you try to add it in now, it might really be impossible to do.
um, that ship has sailed for Red Tide, yes. And I think it has probably sailed for the unannounced title that we're working on as well. And the reason for that is that it's the size of the feature just it just isn't something we can fit into the scope of our project. As I think I mentioned when we talked before that we're not like we're doing this with limited funding and we're bootstrapped and we need to work on other stuff as well for funding. So our time is very limited right now, and we kind of went a bit over budget time wise with Red Tide. So um, we're limited in terms of what we're going to be able to add feature wise, like game engine feature wise. Uh,
Is there any opportunity? I mean, speaking of that, is there any opportunity with, a very robust, good, solid game like Red Tide, um, it, in this kind of developer world? Is there anything to be like, hey, let me go to a bigger, development company and say, look, I have this IP, I have a whole structure. What we need is kind of funds to do more and take it to the next level. And are you interested in, partnering and you know, money backing us on that? Is it like, do you ever do any of that, or you don't want to do that because you just want your own independence and your own timeline? How does that work, if at all?
well, I think we do want our independence. I think that's important for us. But so that's part of it. But it's also the market is very um, especially the mobile scene is very there's a lot of competition and the the bigger publishers they are not interested in the type of games that we make because our games will not be able to scale the way that they want games to scale. So if someone's going to invest, say, I don't know, $500,000, for instance, into our studio, then they want 10 times that in return.
Right.
Uh, and that's it's not likely that our IPs are going to be able to do that, at least not in its current shape and form. So I would say it would be difficult for us to find funding, and the climate is also even more difficult right now. The mobile gaming landscape is changing a lot, especially because of the changes to advertisement rules. Like Apple has made it very difficult for attribution of advertising, so that you don't really. It's been become less effective to do user acquisition through ads. It's something we've never done, but it's changed the landscape for the big players.
Right.
So, I mean, we would love to get in capital if it's the right partnership for us, but we haven't found that yet, at least.
Now, this next one, because again, everyone loves Red Tide and just wants to see more Red Tide, and this might be something that is achievable. Can just kind of more side quests, populate it with more people that you'll meet that'll send you on missions, to fight this person or collect this and bring it back to them. Is there room and scope to just continue to populate the world of Red Tide with more content, more side quests, which then maybe gets more people to reach higher levels. I think you said the highest level someone reached was level 19, but maybe more people can reach those levels if there's more just kind of random side quest content that they could run into and explore and maybe end up on the achievement list, whether they've done that particular side quest for somebody, which creates more content and more replayability. Is there any thought process of adding more into Red Tide from a side quest content? Doesn't affect the main story, but it's content there that you can engage or choose not to engage in.
Well, it's definitely possible for us to do that, and I mean there was content that was cut, so there's, I mean, both for Untold and for Red Tide, there's content that Chris has, wanted to add, but in the end we cut it because of time constraints. So it's not impossible that we will add something at some point, but right now we're focusing on the next game. So and of course our time is limited, and writing takes a lot of time. So it's more important for us right now to focus on the third game rather than adding content to the existing ones.
Well, like even with I know, again, I liked Eldrum quite a bit. I'd be willing to pay whatever. I'll just make up a number. $2.99 for the side quest package. Added into it's all optional. But if I wanted to have some extra content to play, because I just love being in that world, I would be willing to pay to have those particular side quests. So there is, I think, even monetized opportunity there as opposed to just putting it in for free. If you want the side, you have a fully fledged game as it is, as I've played, and it's great, and I haven't even seen 30% of it at this point. But you could create and monetize even more content in that world.
Yeah, that's definitely something that is, I mean, it's something that we could do, like both technically, and it's something that would be fun to do. And you're not the first one to mention it. It's been talked about before in our community. I think one thing that's a bit difficult for us in terms of doing something like that is that we have, like, our reach is limited. Like if we if we add new content. So for instance, take Untold. Untold has had maybe around 300 or 350,000 downloads.
Okay, great.
And if we add a feature, then we don't really have a way to let those downloaders know about that feature. So if we add a DLC, there's no way for us to let the players know about it, and we need enough players to be able to make it worthwhile. So our own reach is maybe a few thousand. Like we have a bit over, like if we look at how many newsletter followers we have, a Discord server, we have, Facebook followers, Twitter followers, stuff like that. Our own reach is maybe maximum 5,000 people that we can reach. And that's the only, those people are more guaranteed buyers. They're obviously not guaranteed buyers, but more likely to buy.
Right.
But the rest, the players that have already played the game, we will not be able to reach them with this new information. So it's a challenge, and it's also difficult to us for us to know, should we put our efforts into this or that?
Sure.
So for us right now, making more games seems like a better option than adding DLCs to existing games.
Now, to solve that problem of reach, because it's kind of like I have the same problem with Netflix, where I've watched some season of something and season 2 came out and I had I didn't realize because they don't really prompt me. Now, the funny thing about Netflix is they have my email address because they always tell me about new shows that just dropped on Friday. Is there any way kind of upfront when, someone is downloaded the game of, here, create your, username and your email address, and then that way you would be able to collect their email addresses and, send them an email that they can opt out if they don't want to keep getting them. But, so you could announce, hey, there's side quest, content now for game number 3 or Untold, or Red Tide. But I mean, maybe it's past where you have that ability to do that on those previous games. But for this upcoming game, is there a way that you can, through the application, basically collect people's email addresses for, update on new content that's available?
Yeah, it's something that is I'm always thinking about those things. But we have a long list of stuff to do, and it's always a bit difficult to prioritize. One thing that I've thought about recently is adding cloud save. So, I mean, I would, if we want to ask users for their email, then I mean, of course, we could have some kind of newsletter sign up. But in my experience, most people don't do that. Most people won't sign up. But if we had, for instance, cloud save, so that if you log in, if you create an account,
right,
then you can get cloud save. So you could either play on multiple devices or just for backups. We get the question from time to time, how do I transfer from my new phone, etc.
Right.
Then that might be a way to collect email addresses, for instance. But of course, that also requires adding a big feature. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, it's again, the hardest thing in any of these mobile games is there's so many games that come out is to get your game heard, and get attention, of all the games that have come out. Again, with 350,000 people that you said have downloaded Untold, I mean, such a potentially powerful, source of information. I mean, again, when you put out Red Tide, if you had a way to contact those people who hopefully, a majority liked your game, you could let them know, hey, there is a Red Tide. Maybe you didn't know because 1,000 games are coming out a day, but we have a sequel, and we wanted to let you know about it. I think that's such a powerful tool, and not that you would do anything other than give people a chance to be informed about new content, new DLC or a new game, by you that's like Untold or Red Tide. But there's so many times that I want to be notified about something, and it's difficult to remember. It's kind of difficult to remember to even search for it. Like, oh yeah, I enjoyed Red Tide, but am I going to remember to go back and see, is there anything else by Act None 4 years later? I probably would have forgotten.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's actually, I think it's kind of a missed opportunity in terms of for App Store and Google Play, because on Steam, for instance, you can follow a
Right,
developer,
right.
and you can
Yeah,
wishlist the game.
right. Yeah, and I get
And
emails about that all the time. Being informed by Steam, like, oh, something on your wish list is now 33% off. That would be great to
yeah,
know too. Yeah,
yeah, but they don't have that neither in neither App Store or Google Play. I guess could be because they're not game focused. They don't want to add features that are not, you know, for all kinds of apps. Maybe that'll change. I don't know. There's talks about Apple being forced have to allow multiple app stores, like third-party app
oh yeah,
stores,
right.
because of some EU.
Monopoly.
Yeah. So, and if that happens, then I'm sure we'll see, I don't know, maybe even Steam, but some kind of game-focused app store, which might have different settings and features
Yeah,
from
notifications
us.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's definitely something we need to get better at, getting to know our customers, being able to reach out, because when we released Red Tide, for instance, we had, I mean, we could reach maybe 6,000, and of course, not everyone is listening all the time. So even if that's
Right.
our reach, then of course we maybe three or four or 500 we're actually,
Paying
picking
attention.
up the signal. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So um, luckily, we were featured by Apple, and probably because we already had a title and they pick up on those things, you know. But yeah, the mobile gaming space is very difficult to navigate, I think.
Well, yeah, and again, I think that you create a great game, but it's how do people even know that great game is there?
Yeah,
It's such a difficult, a struggle I hear from a lot of developers. I, my focus is on making a game. I have a whole nother component or career of marketing this game and learning how to market it and learning how to get attention for it. Um,
hmm
Again, but what I would hope is everyone who follows me would give this game a download and give it a play, because again, we don't see many games like this accessible to the blind and visually impaired. So I think it's a great game for people to put their support behind. So I hope through our couple of interviews that we've done and the review that I'm going to put out, that it gets attention and you see some traffic, tick up after we've released
yeah,
these things.
thank you.
Uh,
I hope so too. Yeah.
um, kind of besides the side quest which we talked, this is kind of a similar aspect to side quest. Maybe even folds underneath it, but kind of like um, like the, a bounty, or a guild where you go and go find people around the world and bring them to justice, sort of thing. Which again, I guess could kind of fall under the side quest aspect, but it's kind of more focused on finding people and battling those people in kind of a bounty reward system. So that was something people mentioned. Again, might kind of fit it under the side quest kind of concept, but um, just to encounter even more fighting scenes. I think people did enjoy the fighting scenes and just want to have basically an endless opportunity potentially to, or even more opportunity to, fight some battles.
Right. That's something you can expect to see more of in the upcoming title.
Okay.
I can't say more right now because it's a lot of stuff is still on the planning stage, but
Right.
that's something we want to do. Like we want to increase the replayability of combat in a sense. Like, so we'll see where exactly it lands, but it's definitely something we're hoping to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think people were saying with the bounty system is you go out and basically every time you go out next, it's a little bit harder, and maybe it gets to a point where it's near impossible, or people find really unique ways to kind of actually beat those later ones, but
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
progressively gets harder and harder and harder
yeah,
and
yeah,
harder
yeah.
until it's near impossible. um so
Yeah, and we might, yeah, something like that is something I would really love to do, and it would likely have less. You would gain less and less from it. I forgot the term for
Right.
it.
Yeah, diminishing
Uh,
returns.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see. I really hope that it'll work out the way it is in my head. But we'll see.
Now this, and again, this probably requires servers and things on the back end and whatnot. But people are also like, I love my character, I love the armor that I've gotten and the weapon that I use. I'd love to fight against other people. Not just computer generated people, but I like to fight my friend who's collected their gear and they're kind of like a gladiator, online multiplayer type of
Yeah, yeah. This
arena.
is something I really want to add this. It's right now it's very low priority. As I mentioned, like we um we almost didn't start the making the third game. So just to give you an idea of like which conclusions we've drawn in terms of what we can add feature wise to the third title. So that's why we like I would love to add tons of features, but we I'm not able to because I've spent too much time on Red Tide and I need to work to regain some financial
Sure.
stability.
Right.
So um what you mentioned, like player versus player, is something I would love to add. And maybe I seriously doubt that it'll be part of the third game when it's released, but that is something that might maybe get added afterwards to that game because there will be um let's just say that we will have some room. It makes sense in that game to have that.
Right. Yeah, and again, I'm a big proponent of you know paying for content, right? You put out Red Tide, it's a base game. Let's say just as it is. Many hours of content. You charge something, and I forget what the cost is on. What's the cost on Red Tide? Do you remember?
We actually introduced a premium version a few weeks back. So there's the basic version where you get all the content, but
Yeah.
you get some quality of life features with the premium version. But the basic version is, I think, $6.99 US
Okay.
dollars, something like
Right.
that.
Right. So let's say it is $6.99. So you have the space game $6.99, and everyone could just pay $60.99 and have a great game to play. And I'm all for, hey, we have a side package or a side quest package, and that's $1.99, and your entrance to the online battle arena, is 99 cents, or whatever the case may be. And you could also buy the whole thing. If you bought it in its individual components, maybe that costs you $12. But if you buy it as a premium package, you get it for 10, 20% off or whatever the case may be. I'm kind of like really pro doing that, because then it gives you a monetization of adding some more things and giving more content. And people don't have to pay for it if they don't want to ever do battle royally or arena fighting. But if
Hmm.
that's something that you are interested in too, then you pay your 99 cents and off you go, and you're doing that as part of the experience. So I would love to, as you're thinking about whatever third game is, think about that, and having whatever base concept is, but have it modular enough that people can add on, or as you said, maybe there's a quality of life thing where whatever, you know start off with a little bit extra money or a set of gear that starting set of gear that you get to start off with, some other quality of life that maybe make the game a little bit easier if some people want to pay an extra buck to have that equipment, for the non multiplayer component, for the single player aspect of playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, well, yeah. There's a lot of. I mean, the whole DLC or add-on on top we could choose really. So there's a lot to say there, but yeah, we're constantly looking into these things and what we can do, uh, both to help us make, I like in the end to help us make more and better games, really.
I mean, along that, this is kind of, along the same concept, but, is to add a chapter four, kind of, the continuation of the game, at the end, you finish the game, certain people are with you, certain people aren't, acquired some amount of wealth. So, some people are like, it'd be great if we start off, a chapter four that continues the story. And, depending on what kind of wealth I've, gathered in the end of chapter three, maybe it allows me the chance to buy, a certain level of home base. If I only have $1,000, I get a shack. If I have $10,000, I get to buy
Mm-hmm.
a big, huge manor house, and that kind of, pulls a connection of the end of chapter three to the start of a chapter four, and just kind of continue the story. Like, again, I think people really liked the world. Why stop here? Leverage that infrastructure. You have all things, choices people have made. Just let it continue in a chapter four of that world. So, I mean, it sounds like you're, going on to a new game, but, have you ever thought of, Eldrum, Red Tide, two, or, the direct continuation of this story as a new game, as an option?
Well, I think the short answer is no. It's not. It's not something we are likely to do because I think generally it's a good sign that people want more because it means that they enjoyed it. Uh, I think continuing a game that has and I think this goes for a lot of games. You try to have a story with a certain type of climax. You have a story arc, and if you continue the story, then you may not. You may, as a writer, you might have to forcefully create stuff that doesn't necessarily lead anywhere, and it has to make sense.
Mhm.
And so I think stories need endings,
Okay.
and
And
that's
it sounds like you're interested in telling a different story now. You've told this story and you want to branch off a bit.
exactly. And it's interesting that you mentioned the you amass a certain amount of wealth, etc. And those things actually matter in the ending. I mean, in Red Tide, there's over 100 variations of endings that you can get, and if you have over a certain amount of gold, then you can settle down and you will have a different type of ending, which takes that into account. Right?
I did like, we didn't talk about this in our last interview, but I did really like the epilogue, in that it kind of told you, based off the choices you made, like, oh, you ended up here and here's what people think of you. And,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
this person was with you or that person wasn't, I liked that kind of, this is what happened after the game ended, sort of epilogue, which did also, as you said, seemed modular depending on your choices. Different paragraphs pop in and out, kind of explain what happened. So, I thought that was
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
a nice touch to the game as well. Um, so, one of the things, again, I think people appreciated the battle sequence, again, depending on your gear that you have and the weapons that you have. You have different special attacks, and the enemy has different attacks that they're coming, and you kind of have some strategy to that. But like someone was saying, look, I would love it if I was an archer, let's just say, that when I enter a battle, uh, you know, by default, unless there's special circumstances, I start 2 or 3 steps away from that person. I wouldn't let that person get close to me. I would start firing arrows at them, 2 or 3 steps away, requiring them to, spend time and turns trying to get close to me. And maybe by the time they do get close to me, and I no longer have, where I can fire an arrow at them because they're right on top of me, now I have to switch to a weapon, but I have disadvantage with that weapon because that's not who I am. I'm an archer. I'm not really a close melee fighter. So kind of creating a whole nother layer of, what type of specialty, if you will, do I have as a fighter? Maybe I am a melee fighter,
Hmm.
um, and I do great when surrounded by multiple people or fending off multiple people, but I have disadvantage against people who are attacking me from range, sort of thing. So like to add that extra layer of almost kind of like selecting a class or a fighter type and then having advantage disadvantage on certain situations. Again, maybe if I'm a thief type of character, when you have certain encounters where you have close fighting, you're fighting with inside a room in a house, you have some significant advantage in that over
Yeah, yeah.
somebody else. So there was kind of that concept of again, and some of this might be really too difficult to add to Red Tide, but maybe this next game, like thought process of adding that even additional layer. And again, this new game, I don't know how close the combat is to what you put in a Red Tide, or if it goes in a completely different direction. But people were thinking through, oh, it would be great if they had this extra layer um,
Yeah.
to the battle.
Yeah, this is something that we definitely want to improve, and is likely to improve because I think from my own perspective, I feel I failed a bit with Red Tide in terms of uh, build versatility in combat. I think it's we succeeded with some things. Like I do like that the main protagonist is kind of a Swiss Army knife. You swap weapon depending on the situation and circumstance. Maybe you start with a shield when it's three opponents, and then you switch to the two-handed sword when it's one opponent left. Stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of strategy in the combat, even though I feel I'm quite happy with like how combat works and the balance of it and the mix between RNG and strategy. So,
Yeah,
but I think in terms of ranged combat, for instance, I think we failed. We didn't reach the point where we wanted it to be, and I think it was simply a matter of not having enough time to make it work really well.
yeah. Now, I will
Uh,
say my first playthrough, I was like, oh, I'll be a ranger, and I got some bow at the beginning and or spent money on a bow at the beginning, but I found very quickly, uh, when there's more than one opponent, when three people are surrounding you, that bow doesn't do you much good. You're better off with some
yeah,
weapon that's going to do multiple attacks against multiple enemies that are surrounding.
hmm
So I barely
yeah,
ended up using
yeah,
my
yeah.
bow.
Exactly. And I think also the fact that you need to have gained advantage, which is in the combat sense, it's something you gain from uh, you know performing
Successful
well in
actions.
combat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need that in order to be able to move away from your opponent, and you need to be able to move away in order to attack from
Right.
a distance. So, and most fights start in melee distance. If you equip a ranged weapon, then in some scenes and some places where it makes sense, you have the option to engage in combat where the opponent is further away. But it's not, it could have been tweaked. It could be, and maybe we'll do that in the future to make it a little bit more viable to go for ranged because it wouldn't be that difficult for us to make it slightly easier.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I look at it as, and I think this wouldn't really upset balance per se, but like if you have a bow equipped, um, when you enter battle, you start, instead of one square away from somebody, unless it's a special circumstance, you're in a house or something like that.
mm,
You just start two steps away, and maybe you can, spend skill points, or if you have a higher agility or perception, or some other skill set, as you raise that up, maybe you get to start three steps away. because you
Hmm.
perceive the
Hmm.
enemy before they've gone to you. And then, as people try to approach you, you try to, pick them off, and maybe you get through a few of them before one of them gets to you in melee, and then you have to switch your weapon. But
Yeah.
again, if you have a strong enough bow, maybe you can pick them all off before they ever can get close enough to you. Uh, again, not that I know too much about coding, but it seems like you could leverage that in there without too much difficulty, and
Yeah.
then it creates a
Yeah.
whole range
That's
ability.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. We just didn't have time for the release to do that, and we did make some tweaks actually after release in this department. And there's some work that could be done, and maybe will be done even in Red Tide. But I think um, we will definitely revisit this for the third game because I want range to be an actual option, not just for certain occasions. Uh,
Right.
I want I want I want the third game to provide a bigger, um, better, like better support for certain archetypes, certain play styles that are common to the RPG
Right.
sphere, like ranger style or rogue style or
Right.
barbarian style.
Yeah. So,
Now,
so as I was
exactly
saying, kind
how.
of, adding maybe under certain circumstances, depending on what you are, you get advantage or disadvantage. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, something like that. That's one idea. Another idea that we've thrown around is that you could have passive skills, for instance. So if you invest in a passive skill that is good for rangers, it might be something like being able to move away without advantage, for instance. Like,
right.
and then that would only be accessible for those that invest in that skill.
Right.
uh, Stuff like that. But we haven't really decided if it's going to be. It's probably not going to be like a fully fledged class system, but um, something in that direction, I
Right.
think.
Yeah. As you said, or you again, maybe just you have checks, again, in your regular skill set. If you have a high enough perception or a high enough agility, maybe it costs you, half the advantage to move. You know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
probably
Yeah.
a bunch of different ways to do that. Um, now, I would say, you're obviously tracking in some way, either alignment or relationship, um, preference, whether somebody, a particular group likes you or not likes you, because, there's certain things where, I know one of the locations I wasn't able to get into because they didn't like me and they wouldn't let me in because I didn't do, enough nice things for them or go on the quest that they wanted me to go. But I don't think you specifically announce what your relationship is, or status is with people, or what your alignment is that might impact um, certain things. Is that intentional that you're not really showing it, or is that just or just not something that you thought was that important to really show because you can just kind of gauge how people respond to you?
Well, this is Chris's department, so I'll answer as best as I can. Um, I think the ambition was originally to have a faction system that was um, maybe not necessarily transparent and maybe not visible in the character screen or something like that, but um, something that was bigger than what's currently in the game. So there's there's only one true kind of faction where your reputation will increase or decrease depending on your actions. And we actually um, added a new feature in the latest update last week, or maybe even this week, where we added the we made these reputation changes into notifications, so you will be notified
Oh,
if
okay.
your reputation changes. You can't see your overall reputation anywhere.
Right.
It's not visible,
But now you
but
know
you
this
will.
action increased or decreased your reputation with
Yeah,
somebody.
yeah, and it's for the militia reputation because we want to increase in transparency there because a lot of players have had a difficult time getting reinstated in the
Yes.
militia,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's not always obvious what the militia would want you to do. So at least then you will know which actions you're taking that are good or bad. You'll get better feedback than you used to.
I would feel like not only you said it was one group, which I assume you're talking about the militia, but I mean I would say both of the churches also you seem to need some sort of reputation or have done certain things for them to gain access to
Yes.
later parts of the story.
Yeah, and that's true. It's just that those technically have been not been implemented in the same way. They are based on specific actions rather than a meter of sorts. So it's if you do this specific action in this specific scene, then you can't enter that place.
Okay.
But there are so few like with those two factions that you're talking about, the tribe of No and the church there are so few interactions that would affect the number of the reputation number that it hasn't been implemented that way. It has instead been implemented through specific checks. So, but we are also revisiting this for the upcoming title. So we'll see whether it'll be, more transparent or not. We're not sure. So and we'd love to get feedback on this latest feature as well because we want to know if it helps or not.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you ever played any of the Telltale games on I guess the
Yeah, yeah,
console.
yeah,
Yeah, so like when you take an action, it says like Susan liked this or Susan disliked this.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You kind of again you don't know overall how you stand with Susan, but you know that action she liked or didn't like. Um, the this the kind of the final one that's on the list, and I guess it kind of plays in either this alignment or relationship tracking, if you will. Kind of came across as romance, but more broadly, I think it's kind of like relationship tracking. Like um, whether you meet a guy that is the butcher, and maybe you can change your relationship with them at over time. Like maybe he starts off disliking you, but you can do certain things for him, and then he responds to you differently and starts liking you, or you've done something to upset him and he starts disliking you. So kind of a
Hmm.
to feel more like the world is responding to you, have meters of um, relationship status, if you will, with NPCs. And again, it kind of came across as romance, but yeah, I think it could be broader than that. Of maybe certain actions that you've taken has changed your standing with somebody that now that person might ask you for help, or maybe that person ends up attacking you, and then that's a consequence of some of the actions that you've taken, in the changing relationship you have with
Yeah,
the people
yeah.
around you. So um, again, I don't know if that's again a red tide, ship might have sailed on that, but is that like a conceptual concept of changing relationship that is something that you guys are interested in exploring in future games, or low on the totem pole of things that you would like to implement?
No, it's definitely something that I know Chris is working on. I don't know exactly what the plans are, but uh, as you said, yes, the ship has sailed for Red Tide, and there is a bit of this in Red Tide. But of course, not everyone. I mean, not everyone will notice, but there is. And as you mentioned, your reputation with certain people can be affected by your actions, and your interactions with certain people and your options with them will change. But I think what I can say is that what's planned is for at least one um, reoccurring character that will have, or at least on the at the stage we're at right now, the plan is for that reoccurring character to have, uh, you know, to have that kind of feature where you, depending on your interactions, that person will like you more or less, and that will change maybe the way the way you speak to each other and stuff like that.
Right. In this third game, and if it's too early to say, I mean, is it thematically, is it another low fantasy type of game, or are you going in a completely different direction?
No, it's an Eldrum game, so it's the
Okay.
same, and it takes place on the same continent, the
Oh,
Tyrus, as it's
all right.
called.
So yeah, we'll be getting more of the Red Tide-ish type of world. So
Oh
you
yeah,
want that
yeah.
world building on that. Okay, excellent. Well, I really appreciate taking the time running through some of the wish list of the community, and letting them hear your thoughts and how that played into Red Tide, and what's possible or not possible, or what you're considering for your next game. This next game, is it 2 years away? Is it 1 year away? Like, how long do you think before this next game would be available for consumption?
Well, last year I think early last year in January or February, or actually 2 years ago, I said, I think on our Discord server that for sure the game, and I was referencing Red Tide, will be released in 2021, like that year. And of course, we didn't release it until September 2022. So it's never possible to know. What
Right.
I can say is that our hope is that we will be close to finishing in a year.
Okay.
And hopefully it'll be out in a year, but you never know.
Well, I think we're all excited to see what comes next, and please come back to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. When that's ready to be put out on the App Store, we'd love to interview you, and get an exclusive of what is this new game, and so that we also can hype it up and promote it out to the blind and visually impaired, as we know that the games that you put out are fully accessible. So it's always good to let them know an upcoming new game that's coming out that is accessible to them.
Yeah, I'd love to come back, of course.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for spending a two-part series with us. Part one, all about Eldrum and the storyline, and how that got developed here. Part two was all about the wish list from the community around an Eldrum type of game. And hopefully, we'll see some of this in part three, or the third game, or maybe even a fourth game that you guys end up putting out. And we're really excited, and really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you.